Hello everyone, my name is Anna Malzewski. I am the pattern designer and the blog author of the blog Knitting Up a Storm. I've created a little tutorial for you on my pattern, the Dummy Clap Shawl. This is mostly a tutorial on the ending of the pattern where you bind off and drop stitches at the same time. I've created a couple of swatches of stockinette to make a little mock-up of my shawl. It's about 19 to 20 stitches long. And I will show you both patterns, the 2 drop stitch laddering and the 1 drop stitch laddering. The orange will be my 2 drop stitch laddering, and I'll start with that first. In the pattern, it asks us to bind off 3 stitches first, so I will go ahead and do that. So I'll stick my needle into the first stitch and knit another one so that I can bind off my first stitch. So that's 1 bound off stitch, and then I'll do my second one. And third one. Next in the pattern, it's going to call for us to drop 2 stitches. So the first 2 stitches on my left hand needle, I'm going to slide those off very carefully, and then start unraveling them a little bit. We don't need to go all the way to the bottom. We could do that after we're done binding off everything. So the next thing I have to do is create a twisted loop. And if you've never done this, I'll do this a little bit slowly. So the first thing I do is grab the yarn with my thumb and slide it on my needle as thus. And I'm going to take the first stitch on my needle and pass it over that casted on stitch. Okay, that's 1. And then I'm going to have to do this 4 more times. So I'm going to create another loop and pass the second stitch over. Maybe I should have knit these stitches a little bit looser because it's really clinging onto my plastic needle. Okay, I'm going to slide that one over. Really, guys, I know how to knit. Okay, that's the second one. Make another stitch. Pass the second stitch over. Create a loop. Pass the second stitch over. Alright, I forgot the last one, but that's okay. So now we're going to bind off 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Now, we have come to the part where we repeat the pattern again. So what I'm going to do is drop the next 2 off, unravel it a little bit, I'm going to create that loop again. Pass the second stitch over. And hope that I could count a little bit better for this tutorial. Fingers crossed. Okay, that's the second one. Third. Now these stitches are really tight, so I'm struggling with trying to get my needle into the stitch there. Alright, next we're going to bind off 3 stitches again. One, 2, no, wait, there we go, 2, and 3 bound off. Alright, then what do? We drop a couple more stitches create a stitch and then we pass the second stitch over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we bind off the last remaining stitches, 3 stitches. You can use your finger too. You don't always need a needle. Alright, the last stitch bound off. Now I just pull it off and open up the loop a little bit and then secure it with a knot. Now, this is where I go in and finish unraveling all my stitches. This takes a little bit of time because the fibers are catching each other a little bit and sometimes they don't want to let go. It's always when you want to drop them where they don't open, and then when you accidentally drop one they just fall apart. So I'm going to do a little shimming, shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Try to loosen up those stitches. Where you cast on, it's going to be the hardest to open up. So you're going to keep playing around and widening the stitches. And then it kind of loosens it up a little bit. Now for this demonstration, I'm not going to do it perfectly. I'm just going to do a quick little opening. And then the important thing about this shawl is, especially if it's a real fiber, you'll want to soak it for about 15 to 30 minutes and then you'll roll it up in a towel to kind of get rid of some of that moisture. And then you'll want to block it. I'm going to do a quick pinning. I'm not going to do that many. I'm just going to pin all the corners. And then you'll want to block it to your desired width. You'll want to make sure that those vertical stripes are lined up perfectly so that they're not cockeyed and turning weird like in my example here. But you'll want to straighten that out nicely and pull everything evenly into a nice rectangular shape. You'll want to let it dry until it's completely dry. This could take a day or 2 days. Sometimes you could cheat and dry it a little bit with a hair dryer. But if you block it, it'll look a lot nicer and it'll stay open a little more for you. Alright, now I'm going to show you the 1-drop stitch laddering. This one's a multiple of 4. The first thing we do is bind off 3 stitches. One, 2, 3, and then we drop 1 stitch. So I'm going to slide that off, then just unravel it a little bit. And then we create a loop, the twisted loop, pass the second stitch over, and we do this 3 times total. So here's the second one. Here's the third one. This one's a little tight too. And then we're going to bind off 3 stitches, just like the other pattern. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll drop 1 more stitch. Twisted loop, cast on. Pass the second stitch over, twisted loop, pass the second stitch over, twisted loop, pass a second stitch over if I could get it in. Alright, then we bind off 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Alright, we drop a stitch, twisted loop, pass a second stitch over, twisted loop, pass a second stitch over, twisted loop, pass a second stitch over, bind off 3, 1, 2, 3, drop 1 more stitch, just a loop, pass a stitch over. I'm sure you guys are getting bored to tears by this point. Just a loop. Maybe if I do this in opera, it'll be more interesting. Pass a second stitch over, twist a loop, pass a second stitch over, almost done, bind off 1, bind off the second one, and finally the last one. Alright, pull it off, open up the loop, secure a knot, and then here's where we finally open up all the stitches. And I'm trying to do it as fast as I can, so you'll have to excuse me because I can't see what I'm doing really when I'm doing this tutorial, so hopefully you can see me opening up those stitches. This version looks a little bit nicer, so I recommend you doing this if you don't like your shawl too open. Like I said, the cast-on edge is always the hardest to pull those loops free. The same thing goes for this one. You'll want to soak it for a little bit, and then you'll have to wring it out with a towel. I wouldn't wring it out with your hands too much because you'll stretch it the wrong way, so towel dry, and then you'll want to pin it just like the first one. I'll just do a quick demonstration in case you didn't watch the other version. So you pin that one out, other corner, and I'm just doing a few pins. Really, you should be doing a ton of pins so that everything's nice and even and the vertical bars are straight. Well, that's it, folks. Here's a little comparison. The orange one, the 2-drop stitch lettering, it's much wider, but it all depends on what type of yarn you use, what type of needles. A lot of people go for the 1-drop stitch lettering. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today and that it helped you out in some sort of way. Join me again for some other tutorial, and I wish you good knits. Bye!